Hello and welcome to this week's DW Business Special. I'm Marie Sina in Berlin. Welcome. Today we will be looking at who is funding Hamas terrorist activities against Israel. For its incursion, Hamas has used thousands of drones and rockets and carried out cyber attacks. The conflict has raised questions as to how the group is able to finance these complex attacks. Israeli retaliation also has enormous costs for the economy of the Gaza Strip, which is under Hamas rule. Joining me for this conversation is Matthew Levitt. He's the director of the program on Counterterrorism and Intelligence at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Thank you for joining us today, Matthew.
Thanks for having me.
Matthew, Hamas has been using drones, cyber attacks and rockets against Israel. Where is it getting the funding for these weapons from?
Hamas's funding streams have changed over the years, in particular in 2007, when Hamas took over the Gaza Strip by force of arms, pointing its guns not at Israel in that instance. Israel had already withdrawn, but against Palestinians. Once it controlled territory, it was able to tax, some might say extort, the local population, and that is its primary source of income right now. The second most important source of income, and this is something that has been consistent over decades since the founding of Hamas in the late 1980s, is funding from Hamas. The U.S. government estimates that Iran provides Hamas somewhere between $70 and $100 million a year, probably additional funds in moments of crisis like this, and that has been constant. That is money, that is in kind, that is weapons. There's on top of that training, intelligence support, etc. And then Hamas gets some money from other states that are trying to support humanitarian stability in Gaza. For example, the state of Qatar provides salaries for Hamas employees. Even if that actually goes to Hamas employees, it frees up funds for other things. Hamas has investments, and they have people who oversee their investments. The U.S. government has designated persons in Turkey and Jordan, for example, who sit on the Hamas Finance Committee overseeing their investments in the region. And finally, Hamas raises funds through front organizations, illegitimate charities, and some charities that pretend to be legitimate, raising funds publicly for needy Palestinians, which of course is a legitimate purpose, but in fact, taking that money and providing it to Hamas. And there have been a series of cases recently, people arrested in Israel, a father and daughter team in the Netherlands arrested just a couple of months ago, in that case purportedly having raised over €5 million for Hamas.
Right, so a lot of things to unpack here, but let me start by asking, Hamas has been designated a terrorist organization by the US, by the EU and other Western governments. It's sanctioned, it's cut off from the international banking system. How come that doesn't seem to be successful?
Well, in the first instance, because it's not cut off from the international financial system. Just because, for example, the European Union has designated all of Hamas as a terrorist organization doesn't mean that they've taken any true effective action based on that authority. And most accounts are not going to be in the name of Hamas Incorporated. So it requires intelligence and law enforcement investigations to be able to identify that. And frankly, most security counterterrorism investigators, prosecutors over the past few years have been focused on other things, from the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, more recently Iranian assassinations around the world. And so they're not entirely cut off. The second reason is that they're not only using the formal financial system. They frequently use money exchange houses or hawala, which is an informal way of transferring money from one place to another, where money actually doesn't move, just like the value moves. And also there's a tremendous amount of reliance on trade-based money laundering. So if you are a Hamas leader in Turkey or Lebanon, and you want to send funds to the Gaza Strip, you don't send $10,000, you send $10,000 worth of sugar or wheat or some other basic commodity that would be needed by people. But you send it to someone that is affiliated with Hamas, and they can either then use that material for their own people or sell it and have the benefit.
Right. Okay. So circumventing a lot of the sanctions there. What role does cryptocurrency play for Hamas?
Hamas has used cryptocurrency, and here in the United States, the Department of Justice has taken several public actions targeting Hamas cryptocurrency campaigns. seizing wallets, for example. The Israelis have done the same just since even the attacks. The Israelis have seized additional wallets. It does not seem to be a primary means of moving funds. And I should say this is a way of moving the funds, not so much raising it in the first instance, but it is something that people are watching and that is increasing.
Right. And talking about these funds, do we know how much Hamas actually needs to sustain itself?
We don't know exactly. Most people estimate somewhere around $300 or $400 million. And that includes all of Hamas's salaries, garbage collection, all the things that go into governance. But what Hamas has made very, very, very clear, especially over the past few days, is that it prioritizes its militancy over its governance. Our think tank, the Washington Institute, recently published a poll taken in July demonstrating that an overwhelming majority of Palestinians, including Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, are not happy with Hamas rule and would prefer the Palestinian Authority to be there. Recently, Hamas taking 150 hostages, or at least 130, 120. Some are believed to be being held by Palestinian Islamic Jihad. The Israelis are saying, and it's quite controversial, but the Israelis are saying they are putting Gaza under complete siege. The idea is to give Hamas the choice. Are you going to prioritize the needs of your constituency by releasing the hostages, in which case Israel says it will allow water and medicine and gas and electricity to go back into the Gaza Strip? Or are you going to prioritize maintaining 150 kidnapped people from multiple countries? At least 20 countries have been affected so far. We know that there are Americans who are kidnapped. We know that there are 20 Americans at least who've been killed. And it forces Hamas to make that choice.
Right. And on this blockade, how dependent is the territory on supplies coming in from Israel?
Gaza is tremendously dependent on material coming in from the outside. Most of that, ironically, comes from Israel, not from Egypt. And you'd have to raise that with the Egyptians. But from the Israeli perspective, and I think this might be surprising to many, they want stability in Gaza. The Israeli calculation has been make sure that there's enough stability in Gaza, enough economic opportunity so that there will be calm. And clearly that calculation did not fly, because at the end of the day, Hamas decided to put that at risk so that it could carry out a barbaric attack like the one that it did in southern Israel.
Right. And on the point of tax collection, Gaza struggles with poverty, unemployment level. Where do those tax revenues come from that Hamas uses for its terrorist operations?
First of all, Hamas is able to tax any money that comes in. So when the government of Qatar, for example, provides money for Hamas salaries, they're able to use some of that money for the actual salaries, but the government also takes a cut of its own. The Gaza Strip is a closed, small enclave, and there's not a whole lot of economic activity, but there is economic activity. Daily life does go on, and every aspect of daily life is taxed by Hamas. Any goods that come in, and goods do come in, again, primarily from Israel on a daily basis. The Israelis used to allow truck after truck to go through, and all of that is taxed. So at the end of the day, there's a significant amount of economic activity that does happen, even in an enclave like the Gaza Strip, and Hamas taxed that heavily.
Right. And going back to its one of its most prominent external funders, Iran. Iran is funding the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah and will face Western sanctions for this. So what's really in it for a funder like Iran?
For Iran, this is an extremely effective and cost-effective way to extend its influence well beyond its borders. Iran is under all kinds of sanctions, but Iran, like Hamas, does not prioritize its constituencies, it prioritizes its militancy. And so even under the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, Iran prioritized getting money, first of all, to Hezbollah, and the amounts we believe to be somewhere between $700 million and $1 billion a year. And secondarily to Palestinian groups, primarily Hamas, which together we believe is about $100 million a year, most of that to Hamas. In the scope of things, Iran is a big country. It's a big economy, even under sanction. These are funds, again, if you prioritize this over your constituency, that you can afford even under sanction.
Right. And on this point of Hamas relations with other countries, in March, a Hamas delegation went to Moscow for talks with Russian officials. Do we know any details about the relationship between Hamas and Russia?
We do. And obviously, it's a growing and disturbing relationship that extends not only into the Middle East, but well into Ukraine, as Iran is providing drones. And now there's talk even of different types of missiles to Russia to use in its war of choice against Ukraine, targeting civilian targets there. In return, Iran wants help being able to evade sanctions. It wants help with its military program, and people worry potentially even about its nuclear program. Iran and Syria are also close allies in defense of the Assad regime in Syria, where they're also working closely with Lebanese Hezbollah. In at least one financing scheme that the U.S. Treasury Department targeted, Iran was engaged in an illicit oil scheme that involved raising funds for its own Islamic Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, also for Hezbollah, and in this case, also for Hamas. That particular financing scheme involved Russian financial activity as well.
Right, so we have been able to trace Russian activity to funding that has gone to Hamas then?
Yes.
Coming back to the Gazan territory, how important will aid be for the people in the Gazan territory going forward with the situation?
Remittances are not as big an issue for the Gaza Strip, but international aid is. The money coming from Qatar, the goods allowed in from Israel, and United Nations, European Union, and United States and other international aid is critical. Hamas, by taking an action like this, puts all of that at risk. You've probably heard about the EU debating internally whether or not to cut off aid to the Palestinians in general, just to Hamas and the Gaza Strip. Is there a way to continue funds going into the Gaza Strip without it going to Hamas? No. So this is a very, very complicated issue. Nobody wants the average citizen in Gaza to suffer. Hamas is bringing the suffering upon them.
Right. So you're saying that there is no way to provide aid to people in Gaza without it also going into the hands of Hamas?
Hamas controls the Gaza Strip. Full stop. International organizations are there on the ground, but they operate at the whim of Hamas. They're also operating under war conditions right now, also the choice of Hamas. And so the idea of stopping funds to international organizations is a very, very uncomfortable one. They will be able to do some things, but they can't do everything. And at any large-scale level, activities that go on in the Gaza Strip go on with Hamas's blessing or not.
Right. And looking at the Israeli side of this conflict now, what kind of costs is Israel facing now with this conflict?
Conflict like this, the Hamas war could cost Israel easily into the billions of dollars, both in the expenditures for defense and trying to save the hostages and to make it so that Hamas is not able to do something like this ever again. And also, of course, in terms of lost economic opportunity. Reportedly, 300 to 400,000 Israelis have been called up to reserve duty. That's a very significant proportion of a population of about 5 million. Those people are not at work. That business activity is not happening. And so this will be very expensive. But when a country is attacked from an external neighbor, it has no choice but to rally itself to defend its citizens and its borders, and to deal with the consequences in terms of the domestic economic effect afterwards.
Matthew Levitt, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
My pleasure.
And that was our DW Business Special. For more in-depth interviews and business explainers, check out the DW News YouTube channel.